Your financial future is determined by a single 10-year window, not your entire lifetime, not your income level. A specific 10-year period where the decisions you make compound into outcomes that cannot be reversed. Most people don't know which decade is theirs. They move through life reactively, making decisions based on what feels right in the moment. They never realize they're in the most important financial window of their entire life until it's passed. Then they wake up at 55 or 60 and realize they can't retire. The decade that mattered is gone. The compounding that would have saved them is lost. They're locked into another 10 to 15 years of working. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why a 10-year window at a specific life stage determines your entire financial trajectory, how to identify which decade is yours, and what decisions during those years will matter most. Let me start with the mathematics that make any 10-year period disproportionately powerful. Your financial outcomes are determined by three variables: income, spending, and time. Most people think income is the dominant variable. Higher income, better outcomes. But income tells almost nothing about what you'll actually accumulate. Two people earning identical incomes end up in completely different financial positions based on what they do with that income. Spending is the second variable. Less spending means more investing. But spending levels are surprisingly stable throughout life. The person who spends 80% of their income in their 30 seconds typically spends 80% in their 40 seconds and 50 seconds too. Spending patterns are sticky. Time is the third variable, and it's the one that changes dramatically across your lifespan. At 25, you have 40 years until retirement. $1 invested compounds 40 times. At 8% returns, $1 becomes approximately $21. That's extraordinary leverage. At 35, you have 30 years remaining. $1 becomes approximately $10. Still powerful, but less than half the leverage of a 25-year-old. At 45, you have 20 years. $1 becomes approximately $4.66. At 55, you have 10 years. $1 becomes approximately $2.16. At 65, you have 0 years remaining. $1 is just $1. No compounding. The compounding multiplier drops by roughly half with each 10-year decrease in timeline. This creates a mathematical reality. The same financial behavior produces vastly different outcomes depending on when it happens. Someone saving $10,000 annually from age 25 to 35 accumulates approximately $140,000 by retirement. The same $10,000 annually from age 45 to 55 accumulates approximately $127,000. Similar total contributions, but the 25-year-old's money has 25 plus years more to compound, while the 45-year-old's money has only 10 to 15 years. But here's where it gets interesting. The $10,000 saved from age 25 to 35 then compounds for another 25 years without additional contributions. It becomes approximately $750,000 by retirement. The $10,000 saved from age 45 to 55 compounds for only 10 years after. It becomes approximately $150,000 by retirement. Same person, same contributions, but the timing creates a $600,000 difference in retirement wealth. This is why certain 10-year windows are mathematically disproportionate. A 10-year period where you have high income and high compounding time remaining creates outsized financial leverage that cannot be replicated at other life stages. The question is, when does that window occur for you? For most people, the critical 10-year window exists somewhere between age 35 to 55. Before 35, income is typically lower. After 55, compounding time is running out. The sweet spot is the middle. But within that broader window, one specific decade matters most. The decade when three conditions align simultaneously. Condition 1, peak earning years. Your income reaches its maximum or near maximum. The raises are larger. The absolute dollars available for saving are highest. Condition 2, substantial compounding time remaining. You still have 15 to 25 years until retirement. Money invested during this period will triple or quadruple. Condition 3. Expense stability or reduction. Major expense categories peak and begin declining. Children become independent. Career trajectory is established. Housing costs are reasonable relative to income. When these three conditions align, a 10-year window becomes mathematically powerful in ways other decades cannot match. For many professionals, this alignment occurs in their 40 seconds. Income has peaked or near peaked from decades of career building. Compounding time remains substantial, 20 to 25 years. Expenses have stabilized as children age toward independence. But for entrepreneurs, delayed career starters, or those in fields with different trajectories, the critical window might be the 30 seconds or early 50 seconds. The point is, you have a critical 10-year window. What you do during that decade determines whether you retire comfortably or work indefinitely. Let me illustrate this with 3 different 10-year windows and the outcomes they produce. Scenario A: the person who squanders their critical window. Marcus is 42 years old. He earns $180,000 annually. His income is near its peak. He's unlikely to earn significantly more. He has 23 years until retirement. His children are 14 and 16. His mortgage is stable. This is his critical 10-year window. But Marcus doesn't know it. He's been comfortable. His lifestyle has expanded with his income. He spends approximately $165,000 annually, leaving only $15,000 for investing. At 42, with his first child approaching college, he and his wife decide to upgrade their house. They want more space. The new house costs $150,000 more. The upgrade increases their monthly expenses by $1,200 or $14,400 annually. Their investment capacity drops from $15,000 to essentially zero during his critical decade. For the next 10 years, ages 42 to 52, they save virtually nothing while paying for children's college and the larger house. At 52, Marcus finally has breathing room. The college payments end. He and his wife commit to aggressive saving. They manage to save $25,000 annually for the remaining 13 years until retirement. His total accumulation, ages 42 to 52, essentially $0 saved. Ages 52 to 65, $25,000 annually equals $325,000 contributed. With compounding at 8%, that $325,000 becomes approximately $580,000 by retirement. Marcus spent his critical decade on house upgrades and college payments. He'll retire with roughly $600,000, which isn't sufficient. He'll work part-time or delay retirement. Scenario B: the person who makes strategic choices during their critical window. Jennifer is also 42 years old. She earns $185,000 annually. Similar income to Marcus. Similar life circumstances. She also has 23 years until retirement. But Jennifer made different decisions. She didn't upgrade her house despite having the income to do so. She and her family determined that their current home was adequate. When children approached college, she required them to attend state universities or schools offering merit scholarships. She contributed to education costs, but didn't fund the full amount. These decisions freed up approximately $20,000 annually during her critical decade that Marcus allocated to lifestyle upgrades and college funding. Jennifer invested that $20,000 annually from age 42 to 52. With 8% returns, she accumulated approximately $290,000 by age 52. At 52, like Marcus, she had breathing room. She continued saving $20,000 plus annually for the remaining 13 years until retirement. But here's the key difference. Jennifer's $290,000 from her critical decade had 13 years to compound. It became approximately $725,000 by retirement. Her post-critical decade savings of $20,000 annually for 13 years accumulated to approximately $420,000. Her total retirement wealth, approximately $1.145 million. Marcus has $600,000. Jennifer has $1.145 million. Same income, same career, same lifespan, different critical decade decisions. The difference is $545,000, which translates to years of retirement freedom or years of continued work. Scenario C, the person who captured their critical window early. Sarah is 35 years old. She earns $140,000 annually. Lower income than Marcus or Jennifer, but she's earlier in her career arc. She has 30 years until retirement, which means her critical window extends longer. For 10 years, ages 35 to 45, Sarah prioritizes saving and investing. She maintains a modest lifestyle, saves 30% of her income, $42,000 annually, and invests aggressively. By age 45, she's accumulated approximately $580,000 in retirement savings. But here's what happens next. That $580,000 compounds for another 20 years until retirement without additional contributions. At 8% returns, it becomes approximately $2.7 million. Meanwhile, her continued savings from age 45 to 65 of $30,000 annually accumulate to approximately $1.1 million. Sarah's total retirement wealth? Approximately $3.8 million. But notice, Sarah earned less than Marcus or Jennifer throughout her career, yet she'll retire with 6 times more wealth. The difference is that Sarah captured her critical decade earlier when compounding time was greatest. She made intentional choices about lifestyle early, allowing aggressive saving during her most powerful compounding years. These 3 scenarios illustrate the disproportionate power of a strategic 10-year window. It's not about the total amount saved over a lifetime. It's about when that saving happens relative to compounding time remaining. Now let me introduce a framework for identifying your critical 10-year window and the decisions that matter most during that period. Your critical window is the 10-year period where 3 conditions align. Your income is highest or near highest relative to your career trajectory. This is when you have maximum dollars available for saving without deprivation. Your compounding time is still substantial. You have at least 15 to 20 years until retirement. Money invested during this period will meaningfully compound. Your expenses are stable or declining. Major life expenses, children, house, education, are stabilizing rather than expanding. For most people, this window occurs once in their lifetime. It lasts exactly 10 years. After those 10 years pass, one of the conditions changes. Income plateaus or declines. Compounding time shrinks below the optimal threshold. A major expense emerges. Finding your window requires honest assessment of your current trajectory. If you're in your 20 seconds, your critical window is likely in your 30 seconds or 40 seconds when income peaks, while compounding time remains substantial. If you're in your 30 seconds earning solid income with 30 plus years to retirement, your critical window is now. Don't wait. If you're in your 40 seconds at peak income with 20 plus years remaining, your critical window is now or very soon. If you're in your 50 seconds, your critical window is passing or has passed. The compounding mathematics are less favorable, but decisions made now still matter. If you're in your 60 seconds, your critical window is closed. Focus shifts from compounding to preservation. The decisions that matter most during your critical 10-year window fall into specific categories. Decision 1. Housing. This is typically the largest expense and the largest lever during your critical decade. The family that resists upgrading their house during peak earning years creates a $800,000 to $1.2 million wealth difference by retirement compared to upgraders. Housing is the single most consequential decision during your critical window. Decision 2. Vehicles. The pattern of replacing cars every 5 years versus every 10 years and buying premium vehicles versus reliable standard vehicles creates $200,000 to $400,000 wealth differences. Decision 3. Education funding. The choice of how much to fund children's education versus requiring children to contribute through scholarships and work creates $300,000 to $600,000 wealth differences. Decision 4. Lifestyle inflation. The decision to maintain your current lifestyle despite income increases versus allowing lifestyle to expand creates $1 million plus wealth differences. Decision 5. Savings rate. The percentage of income directed to investments during your critical decade, whether 10%, 20%, or 30%, creates the largest differences of all, often $1.5 to $3 million. These 5 decisions during a single 10-year period determine your entire retirement outcome. Let me give you specific guidance based on your current life stage. If you haven't yet identified your critical window, do it now. Look at your current income trajectory. Will you earn more, less, or the same over the next 10 years? Look at your compounding time. How many years until retirement? Do the math. Your critical window is the 10-year period where income and compounding time create the most leverage. Once you've identified it, understand that this decade is not like other decades. The normal rules don't apply. During your critical window, saving $1 extra is worth $5 to $10 extra compared to savings made 10 years earlier or later. A person who saves an extra $500 monthly during their critical decade will retire approximately $1.2 million wealthier than if they saved that same $500 monthly during a non-critical decade. This mathematical reality should change how you prioritize during your critical window. If you're currently in your critical window, your most important task is protecting your savings rate, not increasing your lifestyle despite income growth, not taking on expensive obligations, not spending down your human capital on depreciating luxuries. The person who resists lifestyle inflation for 10 years builds wealth that the person who inflates lifestyle cannot catch up to, no matter how aggressive they save later. If your critical window is approaching, you should prepare for it intentionally. Make the decisions now that will protect your capacity to save aggressively when your window arrives. Keep your housing costs reasonable. Keep your vehicle situation practical. Build the expectation in your family that education will involve some student contribution. Establish spending habits that can be maintained during peak earning years. If your critical window is passing or has passed, don't despair. The mathematics are less favorable, but they're not impossible. Every dollar you save now still compounds. Making the hard decisions about housing, vehicles, or lifestyle now will improve your retirement, even if the leverage isn't as great as during your critical decade. Let me walk you through a practical exercise to identify your personal critical window and calculate what your decisions during that period will cost or gain. First, determine your likely earning trajectory. Will you earn more over the next 10 years? Will your income plateau? Will it decline? Be realistic about your industry and position. Second, calculate your years to retirement. If you want to retire at 65, how many years do you have? This determines compounding time. Third, identify when your expenses will be highest. When will your children be in college? When will your housing be most expensive? When will your major obligations peak or begin declining? Fourth, find the 10-year window where income is high, compounding time is substantial, and expense obligations are stabilizing. Fifth, calculate what different savings rates during that window produce in retirement wealth. Here's a concrete example. You're 40 years old. You earn $200,000. You expect to earn $210,000 to $220,000 over the next decade, then plateau. You have 25 years to retirement. Your youngest child is 12, so college expenses will hit in 6 years, but your oldest will be independent by age 55. Your house is reasonable. Your critical window is approximately ages 40 to 50. If you save 15% of income during ages 40 to 50, $30,000 annually, that's $300,000 contributed. With compounding at 8%, it becomes approximately $540,000. That $540,000 then compounds for another 15 years and becomes approximately $1.7 million. If instead you save 10% during ages 40 to 50, $20,000 annually, that's $200,000 contributed, becoming $360,000, then $1.1 million by retirement. The difference between 10% and 15% savings rate during your critical decade is $600,000 in retirement wealth. That difference is worth 5 to 10 years of retirement freedom. It's the difference between retiring at 65 and retiring at 70. Or the difference between retiring with stress and retiring with substantial margin. Understanding this motivates different behavior. During your critical decade, increasing your savings rate by 5% isn't a modest adjustment. It's a $1 million decision. Here's something crucial to understand about the critical decade concept. The decisions that matter most aren't the big, dramatic decisions. They're the accumulated small decisions made consistently. It's not one house upgrade. It's the decision to stay in your current house. It's not one expensive vacation. It's the pattern of all vacations. It's not one subscription service. It's all the convenient spending that stacks. The person who saves an extra $1,000 monthly during their critical decade through thousands of small choices builds dramatically more wealth than the person who saves sporadically. Conversely, someone who spends an extra $1,000 monthly during their critical decade through lifestyle creep, slightly nicer restaurant here, upgraded vehicle there, added subscription there, forfeits millions in retirement wealth. The mathematics are straightforward, but psychologically difficult. Your current comfort during your critical decade determines your future freedom or future constraint. Most people don't accept this trade-off consciously. They spend their critical decade in relative comfort and then are surprised when retirement requires work or downsizing. A smaller number of people accept the trade-off consciously. They restrain their lifestyle during their critical decade, knowing that this 10-year period determines the next 30 years. They're willing to live modestly now to live freely later. The financial outcome is predetermined by which group they choose to join. Let me address something important about the critical decade concept that creates resistance. When I say your critical decade determines your entire financial future, people often respond with, "What if I don't hit my critical decade until age 55? Am I doomed?" No, but you are in a weaker mathematical position. A person who strategically saves from age 55 to 65 creates a different outcome than someone who saved from age 35 to 45. The compounding leverage is less. But decisions during ages 55 to 65 still matter. The person who saves 20% during ages 55 to 65 will retire more comfortably than the person who saves 5%. The difference is smaller than at younger ages, but it's still meaningful. Also, your critical window might not be a single 10-year block. You might have multiple periods of relative leverage. Ages 30 to 35 might be a secondary window if you're early in a high-earning career but haven't yet taken on major expenses. Ages 50 to 55 might be a secondary window if your kids are independent and you have breathing room. The point isn't that you have exactly one 10-year period that matters. The point is that certain periods are mathematically more powerful than others. Identifying those periods and prioritizing savings during them produces dramatically better outcomes. Here's what I find most striking about the critical decade concept. Most people know intellectually that compounding matters. They've heard about starting young, investing early, letting time work in your favor, but they don't viscerally understand how concentrated the power is in a specific 10-year window. They think they have time. They'll start saving aggressively next year. They'll reduce their lifestyle next decade. But the math doesn't reward flexibility. $1 invested at 42 is worth 5 times less by retirement than $1 invested at 32. Waiting costs enormously. The person who waits for their critical decade to arrive and then doesn't capitalize on it has missed the moment. The person who enters their critical decade without having prepared is already behind. The preparation happens in your previous decade. The person in their 30 seconds should be building the habits and financial foundation that will allow aggressive saving in their 40 seconds. The person in their 20 seconds should be starting to save, even modestly, to benefit from decades of compounding. Critical decades don't appear suddenly. They emerge predictably based on your career arc and life circumstances. You can see them coming. Preparing in advance determines whether you actually capitalize on them when they arrive. Let me give you specific action items based on your current life stage. If you're in your 20 seconds or early 30 seconds, your critical decade will likely arrive in your 40 seconds. Prepare now. Build the career foundation. Keep your lifestyle modest so that when your income peaks, you can save aggressively. Start saving now to establish the habit. Every dollar you invest at 25 is worth 10 times more by retirement than a dollar invested at 45. If you're in your mid-30s, your critical decade is approaching. Make intentional decisions now about major life costs. Housing decisions made at 35 determine your savings capacity at 40. Education planning happens now, before college actually arrives. These decisions aren't made during the critical decade. They're made before it, in preparation. If you're in your 40 seconds and haven't identified your critical decade, do it now. Calculate when peak earning meets substantial compounding time. Understand that this window is finite. The decisions you make now about housing, vehicles, lifestyle, education determine your retirement. Act with urgency. If you're in your 50 seconds, your critical decade is closing or closed. This is your moment to salvage what's possible. Aggressive action now still creates meaningful change. Housing decisions made at 50 still matter. Savings rate changes at 50 still impact retirement. But the mathematics are less forgiving. Act immediately. If you're past 55, your critical decade is behind you. The outcomes are largely determined. Focus now shifts to preservation, tax optimization, and making the best of the situation your critical decade choices created. Here's the final thing to understand about the critical 10-year window concept. Your entire financial life is determined by decisions made during a 10-year period that either has arrived, is arriving soon, or has passed. Not by your income level, not by your education, not by your luck or intelligence, by what you chose to do during one specific decade when mathematical leverage was greatest. Two people earning identical incomes can end up with $1 to $3 million difference in retirement wealth based entirely on what they did during their critical decade. The person earning $80,000 who strategically saved during their critical decade can retire wealthier than the person earning $300,000 who inflated their lifestyle during theirs. This is why the 10-year math matters so much. It's the most powerful determinant of financial outcomes after your basic income level. Knowing your critical window exists should change how you approach your next 10 years. These aren't normal years. The decisions you make during this period compound into amounts that cannot be recovered through future efforts. The question isn't whether your critical decade matters. The math has already answered that. The question is whether you'll make that decade count.